going on, everybody? Welcome to the Breakaway podcast. You know who I am. I'm your host, John Root. We have another great Sunday conversation, a story that has taken the sports world by storm. And it's another story of how a certain organization has protected trans people at the expense of women. Women's sports is under attack. We've covered that on this show so much. We've had the Leah Thomas situation. We went out there and I covered that. I talked to coaches. I've talked to Save Women's Sports. We've talked to national champions that are trying to save not only swimming, but other sports. And now this has bled into skateboarding. For me, I'll be completely honest. I don't know a lot about skateboarding other than probably Tony Hawk on N64 when I was playing as a kid. But I know it's a sport where men have a biological advantage over women. And when you have this Red Bull competition that our guest Taylor Silverman was competing in Lincoln, Nebraska, the Cornerstone event, they allowed a transgender woman, which is basically you do this once again. If you say trans and then a gender, just say fake woman. It's not a real woman. In America, you can be who you want to be, but this is a man competing in women's sports. And Taylor Silverman, she's been courageous. She went out and said, I'm sick of being silent. I want to make a difference. So let's hear a little bit more about that story and break this all down. Taylor Silverman, thanks for joining us on the Breakaway podcast.
Hi, John. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, I know you've been on a ton of shows over the past few weeks, and this is a story that I know we caught wind here at Turning Point USA, and right away I was like, Taylor, I know I sent you a DM. I want to get you on. Let's hear your story. And I know there's times where you jump on a show and you got 20 minutes, or you might have 5 minutes. You've been on Piers Morgan's show. You've been on Don't At Me throughout Kick the Coverage. But I definitely want to get into some certain aspects of your story that you haven't told before. But we'll start with this. Can you give people the background of that Cornerstone event that you competed in with Red Bull and how long that's been really going on? Because I know Red Bull's in so many different action sports.
So it was back in November of last year, 2021, where I competed in a qualifying event for the Red Bull Cornerstone Series in the city of Detroit, Michigan, which is my home state. And I placed first, so I was invited to the finals, which were in Lincoln, Nebraska, in December. So the day previous to the finals, it was like a whole weekend event. It actually happened during Hanukkah. So I went out at the end of Hanukkah and I competed in the qualifiers there because they asked me to compete in the qualifiers again.
And you say that as you speak from you say that as you speak from Israel. That's where you are right now, right?
Yeah, I'm currently in Israel. I'm spending some time here and spending some time with the people I care about here, doing some skateboarding, and it's my first time visiting here, so it's been really amazing.
Wow.
But I was back to December at the Red Bull contest. I competed in the qualifier, placed first, and then the next day was the finals. And it wasn't until the day of the finals that I was made aware that there was a transgender competitor in the women's division. So this person had not competed in the same qualifiers as I had, although they had been traveling around the country competing in other qualifiers and collecting the prize money there. So I didn't say anything when it happened, because I was uncomfortable and I was really scared to speak up. I didn't know what other people were thinking, and I just wanted to have a good time at this event that brought together all these people from all over the country. And I did. I had a really great time skateboarding, but I had a pretty good idea before it was over of what was going to happen. And it ended up being that the trans competitor placed first and also took $1,000 from the qualifier money and $1,000 for best trick. So they took $5,000 of the prize money that was meant for women. And I placed second, receiving the second place prize of $1,750 plus the $1,000 that I had earned in qualifier. So trans competitor who placed first got $5,000 in total. And for me, second place, my total amount earned was $2,750. And then the third place prize was $750. So everybody who got bumped back on podium or got knocked off podium lost a significant amount of money because of this. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's necessarily fair regardless of whether there's money involved. But I think that because there was money involved, people are listening and understanding that this has a bigger impact than just us not feeling like it's fair and us not feeling comfortable. This also has a financial impact on athletes who work really hard to even get paid in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's an aspect of these stories that people aren't bringing up. And obviously, your driver isn't money, but I mean that's your
No,
profession. That's what you
but
do. Is
it's
like,
it's
yeah,
amazing to get paid for what you love.
of course.
It's a great opportunity.
And then knowing too, hearing a little bit more about this story, do you feel like Red Bull wasn't forthcoming about this transgender skateboarder here? Because it sounds like there was other qualifiers and not you didn't know, other competitors may not have known. So do you think that was kind of malicious intent by them to make sure there wasn't some media storm before this finals?
I can't speak on that. I don't know. Perhaps they just don't know how to handle the situation, or they don't mind and they think it's okay. I think that there are even athletes who are okay with it happening, who don't really understand the bigger picture here and the type of impact that this is going to have on young girls and the next generation of girls who want to play sports, who are going to feel like they can't earn the things that they deserve for their hard work. Because sports are really important in character building and learning about teamwork and finding out who you are. So to have girls feel like it's not even worth it to participate or they can't win even if they deserve it, that's going to cause a lot of problems. And I know it was very hurtful for me to go through that. I can't imagine what it's going to be like for children who have to go through that.
Yeah, because that's where I feel like you have this idea that the next generation is even more under attack than you feel or currently right now. Because everything's leading to the NCAA is fine with males competing in women's sports. Red Bull seems to be fine. And these governing bodies and these organizations and these leagues are doing nothing about it. And where does it end? And I think there's a lot of times, too, like on this show, we cover the big sports. So a lot of people don't know about swimming. They don't know about skateboarding, and for them, they think, unfortunately, they devalue your sports and all the effort you
Yeah.
put in to become a professional skateboarder. You talk about you've been skateboarding for about 11 years, and you've been on the professional circuit for a few years now. You've worked really
Well,
hard to get to where you're at.
I compete at an AM level, although I do get paid. But a lot of people are saying I'm like this amazing professional. I've never said that. But this Red Bull contest was an AM contest. You had to qualify to be invited, and I have made money over the years skateboarding. But I actually feel like being in a position as an AM who's at a level that I do compete in contests that I get paid and I do work jobs skateboarding. I think it's a safer position to feel like I can speak up in than somebody who has a bunch of sponsors who are so woke that they'll just cut them off if they say anything that they disagree with.
Mhm.
So I feel like that was one of the reasons that I could say something because I didn't feel like I had as much to lose.
And one thing I loved about your post, and for people that don't know, you obviously broke your silence that you talked about. And I want to get into the weeds of exactly what led to you saying, I'm sick of being silent. I want to speak up, not just for myself, but for my sport and for women and the next generation. You put a quote in there that's one of my favorites right now is truth is hate for people that hate the truth. And it seems like right now, truth is just totally subjective. It's be who you want to be. And the way that Red Bull is going to look good, or the NCAA, or these other leagues, or other athletes that are forced into silence, they're like, maybe this is the best way to love people, and just kind of let them do their thing. And I think it's an interesting conversation we're going to have probably later about the difference between looking at this internationally to America, because America, it's like be whoever the heck you want to be, but this comes down to equality and fairness in women's sports.
Yeah, and it's sad to me when people think that or label me as being hateful or transphobic because I don't feel that way. And I want people to know that I am supportive of people living their lives in the way that they feel most comfortable. And I think that that should be something accessible for people to do. And I think that they should have rights. I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with somebody being trans. I'm just saying that in this instance in sports, it's unfair. And there's even trans people who agree with that. So I'm hoping that people can hear what I'm saying and not be so quick to judge because I don't feel hateful towards trans people. I have met a lot of trans people. I think trans people are awesome. And I know that the skateboarding community is probably one of the sports that has the most trans people in it, because skateboarding is such a inclusive thing that really anybody can get involved in. You
Mhm.
don't have to join a team. You just have to buy yourself a board and go to your local park. So it's easy to make friends in skateboarding. And I've always been welcoming to everyone I meet skateboarding because we have a passion in common already. So it makes me sad that people are calling me hateful, but I also, it's disappointing to see how much hate this has brought from both sides, because you see the comments on the posts and it's people being hateful on both sides of the debate. And that really doesn't get us anywhere. I think everybody needs to get to a point where even if you disagree, we can have a discussion where we respect each other, because that's the only way that we're going to make progress and come up with a solution that makes sense.
What do you want people to know about the skateboarding community? Because for people like me, I remember when I got my first skateboard, Taylor, I was terrified to actually stand up on the board. I more just kind of was like a luge for me. And I loved, like, Tony Hawk put skateboarding on the map for me when I was growing up. And I know Bob Burnquist, Bucky Lassick, like those were fun. And that wasn't a community that I was in, but I just garnered some more respect from me, and then the X Games. And I don't think enough people know about skateboarding in general, but tell us about that community and how that skateboarding community sets itself apart when it comes to this idea of inclusion. And if you want to play, you can play. Let's meet at the park. Let's compete in these events. Let's try to become professionals and just play and have a good time in our sport.
My experience in the skateboarding community has been pretty mixed, because I've traveled a little bit and then gotten a different feel of how different areas treat women who skate specifically. That's one thing that I've dealt with, that I think a lot of women have had lots of different experiences, good and bad. But the way that I see the skateboarding community is it's very diverse, and there's a lot of different ways to skateboard. You can be somebody who is a street skateboarder. You could be someone who's really into park skateboarding. I myself have recently got really into freestyle skating. Like, there are so many different aspects to skating, and skating is a fairly new thing. So it's still evolving constantly. And there's so many different types of people who love it. You could go to the skate park and skate with little kids, and you skate with some old dudes who have been skating since it
Yeah.
started. And everybody's just friends because we share this passion. And you really have to love it to do it, because it's something that you're going to fall and you're going to go home with bruises and scabs every day. But when you have that passion for it, you don't care about that. You just want to land the trick. It makes you feel so good and you feel very free doing it. And I've been lucky to make a lot of friends skating. There have been times where I felt outcasted because I was, a teenage girl growing up in the Midwest and going to skate parks where I didn't really fit in and nobody else really looked like me. And there have been times throughout the past several years where I faced anti-Semitism from people in the skate community, which is extremely disappointing. And that's something that we're seeing happening on the Instagram posts now. But the majority of the people I meet in skateboarding are awesome people. They're just normal people who happen to be passionate about the same thing. And some people like to go do the contests and take it very seriously. Some people hate that skateboarding is even considered a sport and think it goes against everything that skateboarding is about. And I think it's actually good that there are people who have all these different opinions. I think that's what makes the skateboarding community so diverse. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a good thing when you have a sport and you just allow people, like, if you want to come to the park, let's skate around. I remember I got a lot of hate
Mm-hmm.
when I took the Razor scooter to the skate park when
Oh,
I was
yeah.
growing up. I was definitely that guy, no doubt. Apologies for everybody at that skate park, but now skateboarding has been in the Olympics and it's on the map a
Mhm.
little bit more. And I think that's what's exciting about the sport is it continues to grow and continues to evolve. But for you, when did that passion for this sport turn into maybe I want to start really getting into some of these amateur events and start making a little bit of money behind this? Because everybody loves sports, but not a lot of people take it to the next level.
Yeah, so I had grown up playing sports, like more organized sports in schools. I played basketball as a kid and I was really into softball growing up. And once I got to, I think I was about 16 years old, and I realized that all this stuff is going to end after high school. So I really wanted something that I could do on my own anywhere. And I had always been really interested in skateboarding. I had started snowboarding a little bit because Michigan winters are brutal and boring. And if you don't snowboard or ski, you're going to be very bored. You're going to stay inside all the time. So after a couple seasons of snowboarding, I finally got a skateboard and started going to the skate park. And at first, I wasn't very good. Nobody's very good at first. It's pretty hard to learn, but I made some friends. I continued doing it over the next few years. And it was probably in my like early 20s that I decided to start entering some of the more local contests in Michigan, like in the city of Ann Arbor. There's a beautiful skate park out there. And we have an awesome skate park in Detroit that I've skated some contests at. And I realized I was doing pretty good. So I thought maybe I should go out to some of these other ones in different states and see how it goes. And it was never really about like winning contests or getting paid. It was mostly about just meeting other people who also love to do what I do. And when I go to the contest, that's when I would meet other women like myself who were passionate enough about skateboarding and who were doing it avidly enough that they wanted to go sign up for those. So it's just a really fun experience to be involved in the events. And I think also with my background of playing sports as a kid, I just enjoy that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that a lot of people compete in their local events. Some people take it further, and however you want to skate is cool. But I've had a great time in contests. I think they're important. And when I see young girls, especially who work from the time that they're, little itty bitty kids or toddlers to learn how to do this and get great at it, it makes me sad that they could have opportunities taken away at even a higher level than I skate one day.
Because that's where it comes down to. Like, opportunities are being stolen, awards are being stolen, money is being stolen, and that's when I want to get into the email that you ended up sharing in that Instagram post. So once again, for everybody that's unfamiliar with the situation here, is like you felt empowered. At this point, I need to speak out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the background of everything that happened at this event, and then here's a screenshot of the email. And I know when you put the subject line, you just said contest concern. You just want to have a conversation. Red Bull, hear me out. I've been sitting on this for a little while, but here's what I'm thinking. I hope all it's well with you. You're cordial about everything. I'm reaching out in hopes of being directed to the right person to express my concerns about what occurred at the Red Bull Cornerstone contest with a transgender competitor in the women's division. Perhaps that is you. You're just looking for the right person to talk to. I'm looking for some sort of remedy to this because, once again, I know it's not about you, Taylor, and you've expressed that so much. This is about all of women's sports, and everybody we've had in the studio, we've talked to virtually, who we traveled to go see, says, this is not about me. I have my thoughts about this, but here's how it's affected you individually. And I think when people hear your background, I think that's important too. Like when we have these long form discussions, it's like, who is Taylor Silverman? What's her heart behind skateboarding? What's her heart behind the community? And for her sport to be as inclusive as possible. But there's a difference between being inclusive and lacking equality and fairness. So that's what it seems like now. And Red Bull still hasn't responded, right? Even after,
Well,
have they?
there was a phone call I received that right before I went on the first interview I did, which was Piers Morgan last week. I got a phone call from Eric, and it was like like an hour before I was supposed to go on. And he said, like, hey, Taylor, this is Eric from Red Bull. And I just wanted to reach out to talk to you about your email. And I told him, I don't really have time to talk right now. My schedule is pretty much filled up, but I think that you had a lot of time to respond to my email to schedule a time to talk like I
How
requested.
long did he wait exactly?
I emailed in, I think it was sometime in like March.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure the exact date. I might have it written down somewhere, but I can update you with that information.
Yeah.
But it was sometime in March, I believe. And I waited, and May rolls around. I still haven't heard anything. So I thought that's a pretty good amount of time to wait for an email response. But he said that he wanted to talk. He thought it was a complex issue. I told him that I didn't really have time to talk, and it didn't seem genuine because he was only reaching out after it became a big news story.
Yep.
And I told him he could still respond to my email to schedule a time to talk, which he has not. But that,
Doesn't want to have
I
anything in
think the
writing, I'm
best,
sure.
well, I said the best thing for them to do at this point would be to consider issuing an apology and change the way that they operate their contests. Because I mean, I don't know what he wants to talk to me about now. He's had the chance, he put it off, and I think he's going to get a good idea of what I have to say by seeing all the interviews and stuff now.
Did he give any sort of substance whatsoever? Like, oh yeah, I'm happy to like chat, but there's going to be no
No,
apology.
all he said was, "I just want to talk. It's a complex issue." That's all I got from him. And then
That's.
I told him, you could still respond to the email, but nothing.
I know it takes a while for me to respond to emails at times, but with something like this that means a lot, you'd think someone representing Red Bull and a competition like this, they would want fairness.
Yeah. And I think he even said something about how he had tried to call me, and I was like, "Eric, I have an iPhone just like everybody else. You know? Like I got an iPhone just like everyone else. If you would have called me or left a voicemail, I would have gotten it."
Yeah. I mean, because
So,
you've been
and it also,
sitting waiting
if
for it.
you send an email, like respond by email. That seems the most logical way to respond to somebody who sends you an email. But yeah, it was disappointing to be ignored for that amount of time that I was waiting in between writing that email and speaking up on social media. I was just feeling very down because it had just confirmed my fear that they didn't care what I had to say and that I was not going to get heard. But I'm glad that I spoke up because in doing this, I've realized how many people have been waiting for somebody to speak up and how many people care about this and how many parents are scared about what's going to happen to their kids and how many female athletes want to speak up but don't feel like they're in a position where they can. So I didn't want to be put in this position, but I was, and I'm not the type of person to just sit back and let it happen. So I think everything happens for a reason, and I'm trying to just navigate all this the best I can. But I felt like somebody had to do something.
Yeah,
And I felt like if I didn't, no one would.
and that's what I think is so important with this here, where you should be praised. And I know you've been praised before. We're going to talk about the response that you've gotten here, but it got to a point where you're just like, all right, this opportunity's presented itself. I got to speak up about it. And then when you have someone like Eric from Red Bull here, and once again, everybody, Eric was the person you sent the email to originally. And
Yeah.
that is on Taylor's Instagram. And people try to make this such a complex issue. There's maybe a
Yeah. And I
complex.
actually,
I think
I,
it's fairly simple, right?
yeah. And I was going to say, I don't think I should be praised for speaking up about this. I don't think anyone really should be praised for just saying the truth. I think that that should be a common thing that we should do and not be praising each other for. That should just be the normal thing that everybody goes by, that we just set our values in. And it's nice that people are sending me nice messages, but it's also just very eye-opening to see how scared people really are to talk about this. That I'm getting messages calling me a brave hero. I don't think it's that heroic to just call something how it is.
But that's where I feel like our world right now, they have totally disregarded truth. It's whatever you want it to be. And the truth is really, really slim right now. And people don't want to bring it up in sports media when anything happens in sex, gender, social issues, social justice, anything. Everyone's just got maybe a little bitty truth there, but it's all about my truth. And that's where I feel like that's one of the most detrimental things in our society right now. And when it
Yeah,
comes to
and
something, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I think that everybody wants to be polite too, especially women. We're very much so raised to be nice. Don't say anything if it's going to hurt someone's feelings. And I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I just feel like this is important enough of an issue that we have to talk about it. So a lot of people just want to comfortably stay silent and not stir the pot. And I understand that, especially seeing the backlash I've received. I know nobody wants to sign up for that. And I was aware going into it that it could happen. But we're at a point that we really need to use our voices and people need to share their opinions because the people who want this to happen and want to disregard whether or not it's fair and just be as inclusive as possible without thinking about the detrimental consequences of it. They're louder than us usually, so we have to use our voices.
Yeah, that's something too. We've talked about at Turning Point USA, so many different shows. There's been the vocal minority, and especially in a place like Twitter that I know you just joined. And it's like, that is
Hmm.
one of the worst places on the planet. I hope Elon Musk makes it way better, but I also do hope you know, Taylor, that it is courageous what you're doing. And I think people get to hear your heart behind this, and you're just like, I'm just speaking the truth. But it really is actually courageous because there's a lot of people that don't want to jump in the fight. They're like, oh,
Yeah,
I hope somebody else says something, or if somebody posts something, I'm happy to do just like a little reshare. But like right now,
yeah,
like this is a huge part of your life. You are a voice for equality and fairness in women's sports, and I'm sure you didn't wake up one day and think, wow, I'm about to be on Piers Morgan's show. I'm about to talk to
yeah.
people
Like
from
two
Turning
two
Point
weeks
USA. It's
ago,
crazy.
2 weeks ago, I was just chilling, having a vacation, like going to the skate park, hanging out with friends. I had no idea this would happen, but I had to say something, and I reached a point where I was just feeling too guilty, and I was feeling bad about myself too, because I would like to think of myself as somebody who speaks up when something's done to me. And I felt like I was not being a good advocate for myself. I felt like I wasn't living within my values of doing the right thing and trying to, like do this for other people too, because I recognize that this impacts a lot of people besides me. And I think when you see an injustice and it's wrong and you're just silent on it and sitting in fear, it feels a lot worse than just saying something. So it's a relief to say something.
Something that I really want people to take away from this conversation right here. Once again, you're in Israel. I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona, in America. And you were talking about before the show when we were chatting what kind of pushed you to finally post about this and share your story. It was an
Hmm.
aspect of you felt safer in Israel than you were in America. What a upside down crazy thing to hear.
Well, there's a lot of reasons I really love it here in Israel, and there are things I love about both countries. Both of these countries are amazing. America's amazing. I'm very proud that I was born in America. There's
Amen.
so many things that we have rights for in America just by being born there, and not everybody in the world gets those just rights just being born someplace. So I just felt like here in Israel, I have a community, like a sense of community that I've never had before. Because although I visited places with more Jewish people in America, I've never been in a country with this many Jewish people. And Israel is actually more diverse than people realize. There are all sorts of different people here. Like I have neighbors of different religions and different ethnicities and races. And the way that Israel is portrayed on the media is not always accurate. So sometimes Americans get a weird idea of it, but we're just people. Like Israelis are just people too. So being here, having that sense of community and having some time to unpack my thoughts and just, you know, step away from all the craziness of things that are going on back home, I I felt safer because I knew nobody's gonna, be attacking me if I show up at the skate park in America. Nobody's gonna be trying to argue with me or fight me. Everybody here is really chill. And I can't speak for everyone here, but I think a lot of the people here either didn't even know this issue was happening or they recognize that it's unfair. There's a lot of people here, though, who are like, that's happening in America? I've never even heard of that. Like, that's pretty crazy. You're even at that point there. And I think a lot of Americans don't realize that this is a issue that's not entirely, but pretty exclusive to America. And I'm not the most traveled person. I've just traveled a little bit. It's only my first time visiting here. I don't have the greatest perspective on what it's like to live here, but it is pretty eye-opening talking to people who who never even heard of this happening before. And in America, everybody's heard of it. We've all seen the news. We've all seen the
Mhm.
news about the previous stories. And everybody at this point, people know somebody who's affected by it. So it's pretty common in America.
So plain and simple, you'd probably just say that America's setting a horrible example of fairness in sports compared to other places.
Well, I don't know all the sports news of
Hmm.
everywhere in the world, but I do notice a pattern that most of these stories, not all of them, there was just the surfer in Australia
Yep.
who who won the women's division, but a decent portion of these stories that are coming forward are in America.
And that's where I feel like this whole situation, saying that it's exclusive to America, is so wild to me because we should be the standard. And I think a lot of times America has fallen short with that, especially over the past 2+ years. People look to America and they want us to make a decision. And I think that leaves a ripple effect for the rest of the world. And I think when we look at sports, I think it might only empower some of these other transgender athletes and organizations to just, start ruining women's sports on an international stage. And I think once we start seeing things that might not just be exclusive to America, we might really see the end of women's sports as we know it. And that's where a lot of people are just like, oh, you're just like an alarmist here. And it's like, no, like this
Yeah.
is actually like awards, opportunities, money. Everything's being taken away, and it's starting at the place that should be the standard. Who's to say it's not going to be happening
Well,
internationally very soon? Let's take a quick little break and talk about food. You know, food's a huge part of the sports experience. I love it. That's why I have this dad bod now. But what if you could buy food you need for your watch party and donate to TPUSA without even leaving your home? You'd call me crazy. Call me crazy, but you can do that with Good Ranchers. They sell 100% American meat, and they believe so much in what we're doing right here, they will donate $50 to TPUSA on your behalf when you purchase from them. Good Ranchers delivers steakhouse quality beef. You know you gotta love that. Chicken, seafood, all the stuff you could ever want right to your door. And with our code TPUSA, that's TPUSA, they'll donate $50 to our mission while getting absolutely delicious food. Head on over to goodranchers.com/TPUSA today. Get ribeyes, New York strips, gourmet burgers, and so much more. Order now with promo code TPUSA, and $50 will be donated to our mission of sharing and preserving true American values. Once again, that's goodranchers.com/TPUSA. Get your box today. Promo code TPUSA. Goodranchers.com/TPUSA. Do good while you eat good.
what we're seeing is more and more women and girls impacted by this, whether it be someone like me whose paycheck was cut because I was pushed back on podium in a contest, or women who are missing out on scholarship opportunities. But also, even when there aren't these big things on the line, for girls and women to not get to go compete in sports in a fair way, it's not right regardless. It's something that we deserve. Men get to do it, we should be able to do it. Title IX exists for that reason, and
Exactly.
some people try to twist it to make it seem like what it's really for is the opposite. But if you actually look at it, the whole idea is to create fair opportunity.
That's why I feel like there is a very interesting place that we're at, especially in America when it comes to Title IX and the NCAA. We're coming up to the 50th anniversary in June. And I think that would be the perfect time for the NCAA specifically to say, you know what? We're going to make sure that there's fairness and equality in women's sports, because there's been a lot of people that have sacrificed so much to make sure that women are on this stage. They're getting these scholarships, they're getting opportunities, they're getting awards. And then, I don't watch the WNBA, but something like that, like basketball's growing there. And then there's
Yeah.
other opportunities in women's sports that are garnering a little bit more attention and a little bit more respect. And that's because a lot of people have sacrificed so much to make sure something like Title IX is in place. So I'm very interested to see how the NCAA is going to respond. But going off this idea of anti-Semitism that you talked about earlier, and it's so funny to me because I think you might have mentioned this too. The people that say that you are hateful are being hateful themselves. And they all of a sudden, they are just going to attack you. That they're not going to attack the situation and have some logical points. They're going to be like, something like this. I know. I hope you don't read the comments, Taylor, but I read a lot of the
I've
comments.
seen a few. It's impossible to read them all. I couldn't have all this. I don't have enough time in my day to read them all, but I've
Something
seen
like this,
some.
Taylor. It's like transphobic and probably pro-Israel colonizing Palestine. Like that doesn't have anything to do with this situation. That's what people do. They want
Yeah,
you to
and
hit you in the heart.
it's on the internet. It's usually the people who know the least about geopolitics and history
Mm-hmm.
who have the most confidence in speaking about it, unfortunately. But this is stuff that I've gotten in my inbox for years, just being a Jewish person existing online, which is why I knew that if I put my voice out there, there are going to be people who attack me for this. And I'm not going to, delete every photo of me in Israel. I'm not going to delete every photo of me wearing a Star of David or a
Mm-hmm.
Hamza. I'm not going to delete my photos from the holidays. Like, people are going to leave these comments. They're just words. People don't know what they're talking about. They don't know me. They probably have never been here. And whether it's, the anti-Israel stuff or the anti-Jewish stuff, it's all just hate and it's completely unnecessary. It's not getting us anywhere. And it really goes the same way too. There's people in the comments who are on like all sides of this. So whether it's the hate against me, which is like, you're a dirty Jew or you're like an evil Zionist or you're ugly or you skate bad or you don't wear cool clothes, whatever. That stuff is just words. But then there's also the hate that's directed at people fighting with each other in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So there's people who are saying, well, you're transphobic to each other and you're just a bigot. And then there's people saying back, like actual really hateful things about trans people, which they shouldn't be saying because that's not cool. I'm not condoning the hate on any side of this. I'm not condoning transphobia in the comments or the people who are calling everybody a bigot because they're speaking up about fairness issues. Like the extremes on each side, totally unnecessary. It's not going to get us anywhere. We need to have a respectful conversation. If people want to attack me, whatever, like they're comments that I'm never going to read. But I think it says a lot about why people are scared to speak up. If you
And then
just take a look at what's happened.
And then knowing too, like you are not responsible for the comments. I know I had someone trying
Yeah.
to attack me the other day, or I don't mean to say attack, but I think maybe just try to get some sort of rise out of me. They're just like, I can't believe the people in your comment section. I was like, this is social media, okay? Like
Yeah.
this is a
And
public platform, and a lot of these people I don't even know. So like they don't
yeah,
represent me. And those people that jump in the comments from both sides, I'm glad you bring that up because there's definitely people working at a conservative outlet here. Sometimes conservatives, this isn't going to make them happy. Sometimes they just piss me off because it's like, you aren't even
yeah.
getting to the bottom of this issue. You're being hateful yourself.
Right. I think that when you bring in a bunch of hate and you just start harassing each other and bullying each other, like that's not going to get us anywhere. If you have an opinion that you think is valuable, that should be brought to the table, bring it to the table in a respectful way, the best that you can. I'm doing my best to be respectful. Like I'm trying to use terms that are not going to disrespect anybody. And if I ever make a mistake in that, it's not because I feel hateful, it's because I'm doing my best. And I I wanted to learn about, the other side of the debate of this too. So I did a lot of research before I spoke up and I saw people making arguments for it, but the arguments were never very valid. And then I came across even trans people who were speaking out against it. And I realized that my voice matters and this isn't the opinion amongst all trans people. I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but this is something that all different types of people can agree on if we actually talk about it and leave out all the bullying and the hate.
That was my
That doesn't help.
that was my main goal when I went out to the NCAA Division I swimming championships, where Leah Thomas was competing. Also, there was another transgender swimmer, Isaac Hennig, so a
Mm-hmm,
biological female competing as a trans man. But I wanted to
mm-hmm,
talk to the other side because for me, I think the way at least I present stuff, I want on social media to have some sort of discussion, and everything is so wildly emotional that logic is thrown to the side, but it's like, all right, I can try to meet you a little bit with some of this emotional stuff, but in the grand scheme of things, here's data, here's facts, here's logic. And when I talk to people on the other side, I just ask a simple question where it's like, explain to me what a woman is, and explain to me how a man that goes through puberty has no biological advantage over these actual women. Like, just give me an answer to that, and that's all you're looking for here. Is just like, okay, I'm trying to understand the other side. Sure, we can have a societal chat about this, but this comes to athleticism, and this comes to, like, men have a biological advantage over women physically in the vast majority of sports. And how do you explain to people when they ask you that don't know skateboarding? Like, once again, I don't know skateboarding as well as I probably should. I try to get to know pretty much every single sport because I love sports.
It's a weird sport. Some people don't even consider it a sport, so it's its own community. But
well, it's in the Olympics now, people, so very much a sport. But how do you explain to people that men have a biological advantage over women, specifically in skateboarding?
I mean, men have an athletic advantage over us just in general. They're stronger. They have, I think, denser bones and a higher red blood cell count. And in skateboarding specifically, they can jump higher. Oftentimes, they are less prone to injuries. Women are more prone to injuries in skateboarding, so that can be a major setback in learning things. We're not as quick to throw ourselves down a big stair set because there are more consequences for us. Our hips are built completely different. The balance is different. And it's not to say that women, aren't as good as men. We're just different. And that's why we see the separation in divisions in contests in skateboarding along with other sports.
Has there been anything on the other side, people that you've talked to or other athletes, that has been convincing to say that this actually is not as unequal as people like you or I make it out to be?
I actually wanted to hear something that would be convincing, because it's sad to me that common sense is thrown out the window. But the argument I hear the most is that, you're mean and you're hateful and you're hurting people's feelings, or that not letting trans women participate in women's sports is like equivalent to killing trans kids. And it's just not the case. And it's not something that I think is a good argument. And even in instances where trans women have, either done different medications for hormone therapy or gotten surgeries, if they've gone through male puberty, they're going to have those advantages regardless. And most people can see that. The silent majority, but the vocal minority is very loud. And it's not that I want anybody to feel excluded, because there's been a lot of times in skateboarding as a young girl growing up in an area where there were no other young girls skateboarding that I felt excluded. It's not a good feeling. I think that if you go to the skate park, you should be able to fit right in. And I think that you should be kind to everybody in the skate community. We're all just doing what we love. And I think there's also lots of ways to be involved in skateboarding that aren't competing. But I think skateboarding could also be a really great sport to try out something like a trans division, because there are a lot of trans skaters. I think it could be a really cool thing.
Do you think, and I know you mentioned that earlier, Taylor, do you think there's more transgender athletes in skateboarding, maybe more than vast majority of other sports? Or there's just enough for a division? I'm
not sure how it compares exactly to other sports, but there's a lot of trans skaters that I'm aware of that are very good and that are very popular and have big followings. So I think that skateboarding is a community that is more welcoming to that. And that's a good thing. I just think that I want people to recognize that in contests, it's unfair to women because we deserve to have that equal opportunity also.
And I know that's something that Riley Gaines, she's a University of Kentucky swimmer that tied for 5th place with Leah Thomas, presented as well. And I know we've tried to cover it a lot to find some remedy to this situation that, Eric, if you're listening or watching, I think is a fairly simple thing where it's like men have a biological advantage over women. And but a trans division, I think that's when it comes to this idea of like supply and demand. Like, you have to have a supply of trans athletes. And with swimming, is there actually enough to have some sort of division here? And I think that shouldn't lead to you got your own division and then you're able to compete with the women in like the finals or something like that, or the championships that I went to. Like, I think just right now it just doesn't seem like there's enough athletes to actually say, yeah, we should have a division or we should have a league, because we have to remember too that this is a very, very small minority of people. Like, already being trans, specifically in the United States, that's a very, very small minority. And then if you're going to be an athlete that's trans, that's even smaller. So I think at times it's like, I don't even know if there'd be enough people to have a division.
Right. And I can totally see like why people would think that would be an issue, because in some sports, maybe there is only one person, but I don't think that a very small minority should outweigh the people who that space was created for in the first place.
Yep.
And it's unfortunate because, like I said before, I don't want anybody to feel excluded. And hopefully we can get to a point where we can figure out how to do this. Perhaps skateboarding could be one of the first ones to start trying to figure it out. It might not be perfect at first. This is a fairly new thing that we're seeing, with there being a lot of trans women competing in women's sports and all different sports on all different levels. But what is happening now, I do not think is working. And I think I speak for a lot of people when I say that. So it'd be better to start working towards solutions and finding something that will work, whether it's trans leagues or even, I think it was Joe Rogan has mentioned about how like there are different areas of sports that kind of take people who don't quite fit into your typical categories. Like in the Special Olympics, people who are disabled, they have a place to go compete in a way that makes more sense. So perhaps there could be something like Trans Olympics. I don't know. Like, I don't think women should have to come up with these solutions, but being put in this position, it does get you thinking, and a lot of people talk about it. So we have to be able to have a conversation to even come up with these solutions. And I think that there's a lot of voices that should be in that conversation, not just mine.
I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like, why is it up to you to try to make some sort of change here? Like, why, in general, are women having to play defense? Like, why is the NCAA,
Yeah.
Red Bull, and all these governing bodies just saying, all right, we're just going to allow it and then we'll figure it out later? Like, that just seems like.
And I almost wonder with the NCAA if they think that, you know, once the athletes that are involved right now, like Leah Thomas, and I think you said there's another trans swimmer as well, but I think Leah Thomas is a senior, I believe. So perhaps when Leah graduates, they think, well, we won't have to deal with this for a while. But we're seeing it more and more on all different levels, aside from college. So I think that they ought to step up and recognize that it's unfair to these female athletes and do something different sooner than later.
The thing that's been so interesting to me that people just don't have the perspective that you have, or even my perspective from the media side. I chatted with a lot of people at that swim meet. I chatted with so many people that are you willing to have a conversation like on camera or just audio? And a lot of people, you could just see their eyes just get wide, and they're on a roller coaster of emotions trying to figure out, is this going to hurt me financially? And am I going to be called a transphobe? Am I going to lose my job as a coach? Am I going to be deemed as hateful right now as a college athlete? And then that's going to screw me over for when I want to become a professional? Am I going to lose friends and family? To think just having a conversation is now such a triggering point for people. And I know there were some people out there that even they're verified on Twitter that tried to attack you and saying things basically like, maybe you should completely rethink your path of skateboarding. Why don't you have some compassion? And it's totally missing this issue, and everyone's getting so upset. But how do you encourage people, or hope that your stance encourages people to finally speak out, or maybe even just a little reshare of your post, or have a conversation with a coach or a teammate or a family member? How do you hope that this starts hopefully the turning the tide of making sure there's equality in women's sports?
Well, I think a lot of people get nervous to speak out or kind of tiptoe around with their answers when they are asked about it because they don't want to offend anybody or face consequences, like you said. But, we live in a country where we have free speech and we need to use it because your opinion matters. And if people are going to be yelling their opinion on the opposition when it isn't actually the the opinion of the masses, then it's going to be hard to see that most people don't agree with this. We have to use our voices. We have to speak up. I know it is scary. And even if you're not an athlete, whoever you are, your opinion matters here. We're all seeing this happen, and we all have girls and women in our life who love sports. So I don't know anybody who doesn't know girls and women who have played sports.
What's the next step here?
Like
What do you
the
think's
next
gonna
step,
happen?
well, this whole past week has just happened so fast and I didn't expect any of it. But for me, I think that telling my story is a good way to raise awareness. I think that's the first step that we need is to make people aware of what's happening so that people can actually learn all the context of all these different stories. It's happened in skateboarding, it's happened in swimming, it's happened in surfing, it's happened in boxing.
Mm-hmm.
It's happening in contact sports also, which for me, I actually felt really grateful after this happened that I'm not involved in a contact sport. I
The
thought,
story of
well,
that MMA
I
fighter
lost my
was
paycheck, but I didn't have to
unbelievable.
get in a fight. Yeah, that
Oh,
that actually is very upsetting to watch. And I feel very sad for people, for the women who are put in the position where they, participate or they feel like it could ruin their career and they get injured badly. And then they come out afterwards and say, yeah, that was the hardest I've ever been hit in my life because they've only ever fought women before. And that's how it should be. They deserve to have that. So, yeah, seeing it in all the different sports and seeing it affect skateboarding, I just felt like this is a bigger issue than me. This is a bigger issue than skateboarding. This is something that I fear I'll have to explain to my kids one day if I'm lucky enough to have a family. And I want to have a family. I want my daughters to be able to have the same experience that I did playing on sports teams and learning the aspect of working on a team and building my confidence and gaining skills that I would use the rest of my life because you learn a lot of life skills through sports. Some people think it's just exercise, it's just fun, but it's a lot more than that. And whichever one that you become passionate about, you can take from. And for me, it's been skateboarding, but for different girls, it will be different sports. So this is something we need to protect in all areas.
and I know growing up when we're playing sports, we hear this whole idea of fair play and sportsmanship. And it seems like right now with this push for transgenderism, like once again, it's like in America too, especially just be who you want to be, but specifically in sports, we hear that instilled in us. You talk about those values, fair play, sportsmanship. That's not happening right now. And then thinking, even when you're going into a competition and then you hear you're going to compete against a biological male, that it's demoralizing. And I know some of these swimmers at the Leah Thomas event were saying that as well. And you think about the next generation and then some of your future daughters where they think there's absolutely nothing I can do to compete against this male. There's absolutely nothing. I can train as hard as I want, but biologically, there's an advantage there. And if we talk about something that's really hurting women and devaluing and dehumanizing them, it's allowing these transgenders in sports that clearly have an advantage, and that's got to be psychologically damaging.
Yeah, and even there are times too that trans competitors don't, place first and blow the competition out of the water. But regardless, they have this physical advantage. It's easier for them to learn these skills. We have to work so hard as female athletes to gain the ability to compete on any level. So regardless of how good they are, regardless of whether this person would have won in this contest I was in, or not placed, regardless of whether I would have gotten second or first or not placed at all, this still isn't fair. And I think that given all the circumstances of my story, that is why people are listening to it. Because I knew sitting for the past few months, I was thinking, well, I've seen some women go on the news and speak about this, and they'll talk about it for a few days and then it kind of blows over, or people criticize them. But mine, it's like I was in second place. Nobody who's ever been in the second place position said anything. And there was money involved, and it was a decent amount of money that I didn't receive because of this. So, maybe people will pick up on this one and take it more seriously. And they did. So I think I was right to feel that way. But even if it's high school sports, girls deserve to have a place to compete in a fair way and to feel comfortable and to not feel like no matter what they do, they're not going to be successful. It's just a very difficult thing to deal with.
And
And
that's
that's coming from me as an adult who went through it. Like, I just don't want to see this happen to the next generation of girls, because I actually did get the opportunity of growing up and playing sports in a fair way. This never happened when I was growing up playing on sports teams.
And that's why I hope that you really do understand that you got a good heart behind what you're doing here. And I think it's able to enact a lot of change. And I think it's at least led to some good discussions. I mean, even here right now, it's like, let's understand who Taylor is, understand skateboarding, understand the difference between men and women biologically when it comes to sports. And we're talking about not just now, the next generation, everything we can do to ensure that women, we always want to protect women. I feel like that's just kind of an innate thing in men too. When I ask women, like, what can men do to help out in this situation? It's like, I think we're called to be protectors. And you have
Mhm.
people like Eric, other people in the NCAA governing bodies that aren't being strong men. I think strong men
Yeah.
protect women, and they are hurting women right now and stripping their opportunities away, and there's awards and money.
I think sometimes men feel like they're not allowed to have opinions or use their voices regarding women's issues. And to me, that's unfortunate. I think that men's opinions matter too. I think that men are watching it happen. Men have women in their lives that they care about. I think this is an issue that impacts us all. And if you can speak up, speak up. Of course, people don't like to listen to men talk about women's issues all the time. So it really falls on women to advocate for ourselves, which is unfair. We shouldn't have to advocate for ourselves. And, there's other women in this contest who aren't even adults. These are women who are under the age of 18. So I don't expect them to have to advocate for themselves at all. That's completely wrong. So being that I'm the age that I am and that I was in this position, I felt like a moral obligation to say something. But regardless of who you are, if you recognize this is wrong, don't be afraid to use their voice. There will be a lot of people who agree with you and support you. And if people bully you on the internet or bother you and call you things that you're not, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't have a conversation with someone who's not ready to have a conversation. But by raising awareness, by talking about this more, so it becomes a more normal thing to talk about. So it's not so taboo of a subject to even touch. I think that's going to help us move forward.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as we wrap up here, Taylor, if you had a sit down conversation with Eric and other powers that be at Red Bull specifically, what would you want to get out of that conversation outside of the apology that you brought up earlier?
Well, I would want them to know that I understand it's probably a difficult thing to navigate as contest organizers, and they're doing their best. But at the same time, it is extremely painful to see how they have ignored the women's opinions on this. Because shouldn't we have a say? Like, shouldn't my voice matter in this as the person who was the second place competitor? Shouldn't I have an opinion that matters too? I don't know why someone else's voice matters more than mine. If we all matter and we have the space created for us, then why am I being silenced? Why am I not allowed to say anything? I love skateboarding just as much as everybody else, and I just think that it would have been really nice if he would have responded to my email and been able to have a conversation with this back when this all started. It wouldn't have had to get to this point. But with the response, perhaps we needed this to happen. Perhaps we needed a story like this to come out. And like I was saying before, I think everything happens for a reason. I didn't necessarily want to be in this position, but this is what's happened. And it's raised some awareness. It started some conversations. But yeah, like Red Bull can still email me back. They haven't, but I just hope that they can understand that this isn't fair and this isn't supposed to be hate towards them. This isn't supposed to be hate towards the trans competitor. This is supposed to be a call to action for them to make some changes so people don't have to go through this again.
And knowing that equality is not transphobia. It's simple as
Yeah,
that.
it's not right to just throw around words like that because transphobia does exist. And when you throw around transphobia and call everything transphobic when it's just somebody speaking about equality in women's sports, it takes the value away from the word. So
Mhm.
I think that you have to recognize the other perspective of this and you have to look at the facts. There are so many facts that people have to ignore to get on board with thinking this is fair and to start calling everybody transphobic who disagrees with it. So if we can, look at the facts, we can look at these stories that we've already had happen. We can listen to the women who have spoken up about this because I'm not the only one. I may be the first one who's gotten this much media coverage, but I'm not the only one who's spoken up. And there's a lot of conversations happening behind closed doors also that people don't feel like they can speak up. So the more people who can speak up, the better. And that's really what we need right now is for people to stand up and say how they feel about this because I know I'm not the only one. I have a inbox full of tens of thousands of messages from parents and female athletes and trans people who even agree with me. So people need to not be so afraid to use their voice.
Finally, what do you think is going to turn the tide? Do we actually need a transgender athlete to come out and speak up? Because it sounds like you've had plenty of conversations with transgender people and even transgender athletes. Is that who we need? Because right now it's like you have
I
someone
mean,
like
there have
Caitlyn
been
Jenner,
transgender athletes. Caitlyn Jenner has spoken about
but Caitlyn
this.
Jenner, it's just
And
like, I mean, Caitlyn Jenner is now Caitlyn Jenner. Like Bruce Jenner was that's how everybody knew that
yeah, but
Olympian. So it's like,
Caitlyn Jenner has played sports before transition and then has actually gone through that transition and knows the difference,
mhm.
recognizes that. And she's not the only trans person who recognizes that. And there's even a lot of trans YouTubers who make videos about this. Like, I'm going to do a video with trans YouTuber. Her name is Sarah Higdon. She's got some
Yeah.
really awesome videos. And the reason I wanted to do the video with her is because I actually saw a video of her speaking out about this and telling, like, talking to the audience, saying, this isn't representative of the views of all trans people and this is unfair. And if you're not speaking up about this because you're scared of hurting feelings, that's wrong. And that's just kind of paraphrasing her video, but her video is really awesome and excited to talk to her more about it too, because I'm interested in how trans people who recognize it's unfair might even experience backlash from their own community.
And that's why I appreciate you having these conversations because I think there's a sense of we got to bridge the gap and having conversations like that hopefully give people unique perspectives because right now on both sides of the aisle there's people going to be shouting here, they're shouting there, there's no coming together, there's no discussion. And then as we wrap this up, talk about devaluing words. It's like transphobia has been devalued, racism's been devalued, hate's been devalued, and the word women has been devalued 100%. But Taylor, where can people follow you to make sure they can watch all those videos and interviews you're going to be a part of and making sure that you are going to be one of those voices for change? Because I think here at Breakaway, Turning Point USA, and everybody in America, definitely thankful for your voice.
Yeah, and I'm really thankful for the opportunity to come on and talk about this more because a lot of the interviews I've done so far have been a little bit shorter. It's nice to just have a conversation and like get to give some more information about it so people have more context. You can find me online on Instagram that's where the original post was. My Instagram is Taylor May Silverman. And then I just joined Twitter like a week ago. So my Twitter is
Best of
TM
luck, Taylor.
Silverman. Yeah, thank you. Twitter's a little crazy, but so far so good. I'm
Uh,
still learning how to use Twitter.
I love it. I love it. Well, I tell my parents how to use Twitter all the time. So if you have any questions, what I send my parents, I could
Yeah,
send you.
yeah. I probably am not even as skilled on Twitter as most people's parents, but I'll get there. It seems pretty easy to figure out.
I love it. Well, I hope that your voice definitely continues to take off on all social media platforms and in the news, and hopefully it just leads to some fruitful discussions about how we can have some more equality in women's sports. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Taylor Silverman. Make sure you follow her. Really appreciate your voice and your time. See you, Taylor.
Yeah, thank you so much, John. I had an awesome time talking to you.
Win.